to get going. I'm going to ask, for those of you online, if one or two or more of you could give a thumbs up that you can hear me. Do we have any volunteers?
All good.
All good. Okay, perfect. Thanks for logging on online, and thanks to those of you. There's a bit of a feedback here on this. One sec. There we go. No. There's a bit of feedback on this laptop. It just might be annoying for Bill.
Sorry, the audio should be off here.
Okay. Oh, I can still hear it.
How do we still hear it? Oh, there. It's the wrong speaker.
Okay, there we go. Thanks, Volker. Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Kurt Reed. I'm a member of the TGDG Planning Committee. Thanks for joining us today. In a moment, I'll introduce today's speaker, but before we do that, I'll just do a quick run through. I'm sure all of you in this room, perhaps some of you online, are already familiar with TGDG's mission. I won't go through the full thing, but basically we are a bunch of geo geeks that like to get together every now and then to talk rock. But more than that, we also provide student support based on the membership fees that our members pay. And we look to put together these technical talks every few weeks. And today we're honored and happy to have a distinguished speaker with us that I'll introduce momentarily. For those of you joining us online on GoToWebinar, if you have any audio issues, just call the number that's provided to you. There's a link somewhere on your page to post questions, and we'll address those questions at the end of today's presentation. Today's presentation is on the Iska. Am I saying that right? Iska? It's a new giant silver tin polymetallic deposit in the prolific Bolivia tin belt. Today's presentation will be given by Eloro Resources Executive VP Bill Pearson. And I won't go bother with the abstract. Bill will run you through that, I'm sure. Just a quick show of hands in the room, and maybe those online. Who here is a PGO? Okay, so about half the room in the room, or more than half in the room, have put up their hands. Well, we all have this gentleman to thank for that distinction and for the annual fees that we all pay for our PGOs. As many of you may know, Bill was the founder and first president of the APGO, which is now the PGO, as I understand it. Bill's been around for a while. He says here 48 years of direct experience. Many of you may know him from his days back at Desert Sun when that was acquired by Yamana Gold, and of course Central Sun, another one of his ventures, acquired by B2 Gold. So he's certainly no stranger to the area of exploration and project development. So today we're happy to have Bill here to give his presentation. So please give him all your attention and give Bill a warm welcome.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Kurt. Really a pleasure to be here to tell you about a really exciting deposit. I've had the good fortune of working on some very interesting projects like Jacobina, and it's a little bit of deja vu in this current market, because when I started Desert Sun, people thought we were nuts. It was too low grade, it was never going to make it, everything had been found. I said at the time, when this thing goes back into production, it's going to be a great mine going for 25 years. Now, I was down at Jacobina last year with our 20th anniversary. This year, it's the second largest gold mine in Brazil. And it's got 16 years of reserves. The exploration potential is phenomenal. And so for 2 years, I was a contrarian, and then people gradually. Well, I'm going through the same thing here. The market has not understood what an incredible deposit this is and how we've just scratched the surface. And that's the focus of my talk. It's good to have Terry here because Terry and I were in a little Fiat putting up the hill in Jacobina in the early days, and we just made it. And
Go to first gear to get up the hill.
absolutely, absolutely. So I'm pleased, and I really enjoyed putting this talk together because it allowed me to bring a lot of things together. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff. We actually have Charlie Marawi here who worked on the mineral resource estimate. So that's good. So if you have any questions, I'll pass them off to him. The usual cautionary statement. It seems to get longer and longer with every version of the slide deck. I really want to highlight the team here. You know, I'm here presenting this, but I'm presenting on behalf of a terrific exploration team we've built in Bolivia. Dr. Osvaldo Arce is the key guy here. He's the guy who brought this opportunity to Eloro. You know, he said at the beginning, he said, you know, Bill, in southern Bolivia, every high peak is a tin mine, except Isca. What's wrong with Isca? Well, I'll tell you, there's nothing wrong with Isca. And he's put together an excellent team of geologists here, most of them from the University of La Paz. Our geological team actually is 60% women. We have some excellent consultants like Marcelo Alvarez has worked for me for 25 years, Franklin Vieira, who's a TerraSpec, and Luke, who helps with our accounts, and a very strong geophysical team led by Dr. Chris Hale. Many of you know John Gilliott and Rob McEwen and Jose Guanazo. I'll talk about the geologic AI scanner. We're doing lots of interesting work there. See, Charlie, you're down on the list there. And I'm not going to talk about ESG today, but Anna Moran, who's worked for me for 25 years. Now, you see this book over here. That is the second edition of Osvaldo's book on metalliferous deposits of Bolivia. We're actually working on getting an English translation. It's an excellent book, and he's very passionate and very knowledgeable about Bolivian geology. This whole project has followed a very rapid path. We did the deal originally in January of 2020. We got delayed by COVID, and we started drilling in September. In November, we stepped out. We actually started our first drilling from underground. We stepped out to the west, and we hit this beautiful, beautiful mineralized breccia in the Santa Barbara breccia pipe, which was our eventual discovery hole that came out January 26th in 2021. Since then, we've done about 96,000 meters of drilling, 139 holes. All holes have returned reportable intersections, which to me is extraordinary. We haven't had a blank hole yet, and it's not because we're geniuses. It's telling you this is one incredible system. We still haven't, as I'll show you, we haven't closed it off in any direction. Another milestone here is just recently with our first MRE, and I'll go over the details of that. Sorry, I skipped the slide here. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I've got lots of slides here. A lot of it is space holders, and I tried to make it as visual as possible. I'm going to give you an overview of the general overall region, talk about geology, mineralization, go through structure, alteration, metal, zonation, core scanning, which I'm very keen on. We're doing a lot of interesting stuff, our initial resource. Most people don't know anything about ore sorting. This is a real game changer for this project. And geophysics and exploration potential, because the geophysics here, I think really gives you the information and gives you a sense of the potential scale and potential of the system. A little bit about preliminary geological model and conclusions. And certainly a lot of the regional preliminary geological model, the overall geology is very big component of what Osvaldo has been working on. You can see we've got a very nice core facility here, lots of geologists working away. This is my new favorite picture here. I'm pointing, that's the Iska Peak, about 4,400 meters. So we're down here in southern Bolivia. There's Iska. We're in the eastern Cordillera here, a very well endowed area. In particular, I point to the red teardrops, the polymetallic here. We've got some quite well-known famous neighbors, obviously Cerro Rico de Potosí, world's largest silver mine. It's mined over 2.1 billion ounces since about 1530. I visited a couple of years ago. There's 30,000 miners in the cooperativas working there. It's really incredible. I highly recommend visiting. By the way, if you're looking for a job, my guide told me for $2,000 you can join a cooperativa and you can earn it back in 6 weeks. But you have to work at 4,000 meters and it's very dangerous. New Pacific Metals has been getting a lot of press, and they were really a pioneer in Bolivia with their silver sand, and then their more recent discovery, Carangas. Pan American's operating San Vicente. San Cristobal was originally Sumitomo. It's been now bought by San Cristobal Mining, which is a private company. I visited the mine in September. It's a fantastic mine, extremely well run. As modern as anything you'll find in North America, and San Bartolome and Precious Metals, which is Bob Buchan's group. So you can see that lots of mineralization down here, and of course this wonderful tin belt here, which goes for about 1,000 kilometers. It goes up to the north here. San Rafael produces about, that's Minsur, produces about 10% of the world's tin, all the way down to Perquitos, which is the southern end of the belt, northern Argentina. But the vast bulk of this belt is in Bolivia. If you're off the belt, you can find epithermal silver, zinc, and lead, but you won't get tin. We are, of course, in the tin belt. Now, this is some data that Osvaldo put together. It's a very, very interesting belt metallurgically, and it really goes back to what happened to the Farallon plate about 23 million years. It split into the Coco and Nazca, and how those plates have gone forward and the angle of subduction zone and so forth has really had a huge impact down in Bolivia here, particularly because the crust down here is about 80 kilometers thick relative to about 35 in the rest of the Andes. And by the way, forget everything you know about Andean geology when you go to Bolivia. It is really different. It's been an incredible learning experience for me, and I'm fortunate to have an expert like Osvaldo working there. It's one of the largest tin belts in the world. It's about 6% of global tin production, 5% of silver, and 1.5% of tungsten. And there's fundamentally two types of deposit, these porphyry tin deposits and these tin porphyry polymetallic. And in Osvaldo's opinion, this is kind of a combination. And you can see how the metallogenic center migrates here. One of the other things is you can see these X's here, which are late Triassic, early Jurassic, and they're right next to these late Oligocene deposits. So it's very hard to explain this unless you had a pretty permanent deep mantle source. And you can see the change in the metallogeny where you get tin or tungsten, more tin. Yayega is one of the biggest tin mines. I think it's about 80 million tons of about 0.3% tin. And then we get down to the south end where you start getting tin and silver. And as I'll show you, that's certainly what we see in Iska. So to give you a regional overview, this is actually a very nice picture. This is DHK 15, our discovery hole. Beautiful, beautiful core. All of that matrix is all sulfide. So here's an overview. I like this shot. You can see, obviously, we're in a caldera here. We started our original drilling from underground in Wauwakaza. our big leap forward was when we found the Santa Barbara breccia pipe. We did underground drilling in here. Initially, we went with radial drilling, but then we moved up to surface and we went for more systematic, basically northeast, southwest drilling. Central breccia pipe, which seems to be a much deeper breccia pipe. It's a rock that in Bolivia they call intrusion breccia. It formed deeper. It's not an explosive breccia. It's more like an implosive one. And the research that I've seen that Osvaldo has shown me, it actually takes millions of years for these rocks to fall. Porco is a very interesting adit. I'll show you some pictures here, and is a major target down in this area. But essentially our deposit, as you'll see in the drawing, comes from Santa Barbara hill there all the way across this valley. So this is our core property, about 900 hectares. We have an excellent basin to Pisa, 48 kilometers south. And you might ask, well, how the heck did this thing sit here for 500 years? Well, the reason is it's leached like crazy at surface. So if you sample at surface, you get nothing. The only thing that's really at surface was tin. Well, 500 years ago, they certainly weren't looking for tin. We had the good fortune of starting drilling underground. This was some workings that Edwin Villegas, who we optioned the property from, had done, and he was kind of disappointed in it. It was relatively discontinuous, galena, sphalerite, some silver veins. But when Osvaldo went down to do some channel sampling and look at it, I remember vividly the first photographs he showed at the portal, and I phoned him up. I said, Osvaldo, this thing is hammered. And he says, yeah, you're right. It's really hammered. So we knew right away there had to be something bigger here, although we had no idea that we were getting into something this big. But it was clear that it was a major alteration system. So looking a little closer at the property geology here, this red is the potential pit, which defines the MRE. You can see the approximate boundary of the caldera. Here it's about, you can see the scale here. There's 2 kilometers there, 2.5. And one of the things I'll keep coming back over and over again in this presentation is the scale of this system. It is huge. So, you know, pretty much the regional trend is north-northwest, south-southeast, but as I'll show you in more detail, our mineralization is more now south. We have this Iska porphyry in the center. All this green are dacites. They're various dacitic domes, mostly aphanitic. We have the breccia pipe here, our initial small Wauwakaza breccia pipe, which is more of a phreatic one. The Santa Barbara is a combination, seems to be phreatomagmatic plus some intrusion breccia, and this one is more an intrusion breccia here. But the whole complex is something like 4 kilometers. It's a classic collapse resurgent caldera. And you've had, as I'll show you, you've had an early tin stage and a later polymetallic zinc lead silver. And so age of mineralization, very similar to our more famous neighbors, but things like the high level nature of this system plus the breccia pipe. The other point that's very interesting, the Iska peak I showed you is just in here. There's a kilometer of relief from the valley to the peak. So when I talk about a kilometer deep hole, you aren't even actually in the valley yet. So looking a little closer, there's our detailed drilling. We initially did radial drilling from surface. We did drilling from underground. This was our initial drilling from Wauwakaza. And then we went to sort of more of a grid type pattern, which you'll see worked reasonably well. We did some reconnaissance holes out here. And as I mentioned, all these holes, which total 139, we kept hitting mineralization. And here's some of the principal rock types. The basement rocks here are Ordovician sandstone. And the granodiorite is in the early stage. We don't have too much of this, but the medium grain to aphanitic dacite, porphyritic dacite, that's the bulk of your rock type. This is a typical phreatomagmatic breccia. Phreatic intrusion breccia that I mentioned is probably formed deeper. And then we get these what are called intrusive breccias. They're basically driven by the magmatic system, but they don't really have much hydrothermal mineralization with. If they're mineralized, we call them hydrothermal breccias. So really the overall rock types are fairly straightforward, a typical calc-alkaline volcanic complex. Now we've published quite a lot of results. We've had some extraordinarily long intercepts, 300-400 meters, and the remarkable consistency in these intercepts. So it's not like you have a high and a low and nothing. It's just assay after assay after assay with peaks here. And those are our big four elements. There's obviously other things. There's some gold, some copper, but I'm sticking to the four main ones. That's what we have metallurgical data on, and that's what's going to drive the overall economic value. You can see we have silver. Our best silver was almost 70. Our best tin was down here, 0.2 over 373. Zinc is an important component. You can see here we got 2% over 300. And lead is, most of the value here is in silver and zinc, and to a lesser extent lead. Our PEA study actually will not really consider tin at this time, and I'll show you why, but that's a huge exploration upside, as I'll show you. Just to give you a little better idea of distribution here, I've done this in terms of the value of the major components. So you can see here, the purple here, which is zinc, is quite important. People tend to ignore zinc, but zinc has a lot of value. And we have holes here, obviously, that are quite high in silver. We have holes that are high in tin. So there's certainly variability here. Now, looking at the overall geology, if you stand back in a broad sense, it's fairly simple. The green here is dacite. The red dashed here is the rough mineralized. This is the Santa Barbara breccia pipe here. And everything is really mineralized through here. It's really quite extraordinary. There is some oxidation near surface here. There's a little bit of quaternary. But you can see, again, the scale here, that's about 2.6 kilometers, really long. That's a north-south longitudinal section. If we look at the distribution of metals here, so we just looked at the database of silver greater than 8 grams. By the way, and Charlie pointed this out in his report, the overall average grade of our silver, all the samples, is 9 grams, which is extraordinarily high. But you can see that dacite really dominates here. Either the TDC, which is the porphyritic dacite, or the TDC1, which is the aphanitic version. We do get some intrusive breccia coming in here, particularly in the tin, which is earlier stage, and the silver. And as I'll show you, tin, silver go together, zinc, lead, and silver go together. But zinc and tin, yet. They are completely separate. Now, the other thing that we've defined here, there's clearly two major domains in this deposit. The red is the tin domain, which is tin, silver, lead. And then the other green here is zinc, the polymetallic domain, which is silver, zinc, and lead. There's some overlap, as I'll show you, with lead and silver, but there's virtually none with tin and zinc. And this overall deposit here is essentially, it goes for more than 1,400 meters. That's our drilled strike length. It's about 800 meters wide, and we've drilled it down to at least 1 kilometer. It's a massive system, and it remains fully open in all directions. So looking a little bit at structure, this is looking from the south side of Iska here. This is Porco over here. You can see all the faulting and so forth here. This is actually the Ordovician sediments here. We have two major structural orientations here. We have these north-south structures and these north-northwest, south-south east ones. And as I'll show you, we see that in the core as well. These tend to dip relatively steeply to the east. And they seem to be, at least the latest movement is post-mineral. When you look at the geophysics signature, they don't have any chargeability. So it's very likely, for the most part, they're not mineralized. Osvaldo feels there's evidence for earlier lateral movement, either central or dextral, but a lot of the more recent movement has up and down, like this block here, the block here on the west side, which is the central breccia where the Iska peak is clearly uplifted from deeper down. And this is just a stereonet of the breccias, veins, and veinlets. You can see there's quite a scatter here. And then the second stereonet, we filtered out the main orientation here. And basically you end up between 287, 307, with dips from 30 to 70 to the northeast. And this is very similar to what we've mapped in structures. The problem with the structure, though, this is all the end member of a whole sequence of events that have been telescoped on one another and protracted Andean deformation. So one of the challenges here is to get back to what really is the primary distribution of things. Now, one of the areas that we're really focused on is silver. If you look at the distribution of zinc, zinc obviously is a mobile element. It's fairly widely spread out. Getting reasonable values for zinc is fairly straightforward. Silver tends to be much spikier. But when you hit it, you get stuff like this. This is in the Santa Barbara. This is channel sampling over 165 meters. And you can see the grades here. Lovely grades. And there's a section in here that's over 1,000 grams. And when you look at the core, you see these incredibly high grade silver veins. And as you'll see when I get into the MRE, when you drill it tighter, you get statistics on their side. So our drilling is not giving us an accurate estimate really of how much silver it is. It's a little better on zinc and lead, but this is a lot of upside. So we see this in the core, and that's one of the big upsides here. Now, we have a really interesting thesis we're supporting. This is Camila Aliaga. She's one of our rising star geologists that Osvaldo hired from the University of Bahia. She's working with Dr. Neil Banerjee at Western. I've done a number of things with Neil over the years. Terrific guy. She just finished her field work here. She's actually on the side of the Santa Barbara mountain here. Here's a few of the samples. She's working on characterizing the breccias. The breccias are important. They're very well mineralized. They're high grade. And there's all sorts of different types. And in the next slide, this is basically what her focus is on. So what are the metals associated with these breccias? Because we know there's a number of different stages. And there is primary breccias like phreatomagmatic breccias, intrusion breccias, and there's secondary breccias, which are structural. And of course, the breccias are also rebrecciated breccias. So this whole thing gets complicated in terms of sorting it out. So documenting the mineralogical and paragenetic characteristics of mineralization and alteration to figure out the controls. And then, as I'll talk about the scanner, we're working on putting this into the AI in the scanner. We have about 80,000 meters of core scan, and we want to make sure that computers puts to work. And here's all the various techniques. There's Neil at work here and his colleague Lisa Van Loon, who does the synchrotron work. We actually use the synchrotron very early on, we took a bunch of samples from the underground work that Oswaldo had done. And guess what? The result came out that said, look, this is one big population, alteration population with some subzones. And it's a very, very useful technique for early characterization of hydrothermal systems. It's quick and easy. You need 5 grams of sample. Now, going on to alteration, this is one of our mineral maps. This happens to be tourmaline. I'm quite proud of our mineral maps. We put a lot of effort into calibrating, and they're extremely good. And anyone wants to know how to calibrate alteration and core scanning, I can tell you lots about it. It's not a simple exercise. So when we look at alteration here, and you can read along this, but there's essentially 4 stages here. We have early quartz tourmaline and cassiterite. And one of the indicators that you're getting close to a tin zone is you start seeing a lot of tourmaline. And you can see that when the cassiterite came in, it actually was preceded by a lot of quartz tourmaline. So tourmaline, when we start seeing tourmaline in the core, that gives us a good sense that, hey, tin is coming. And then we have a secondary stage here, sericitic alteration. We have some more tourmaline, a little bit of cassiterite. And then in stage 3, we start getting much more into the epithermal system. And then the stage 4, which is the latest, carbonates and phosphates usually filling open. Now, if you look at the distribution here, you sort of look at it and say, well, maybe there's a bit of a center here. It's hard to say. But if you go and look at that same graph I showed you previously, if you look at silver and you look at tin, well, it's where you find it. It doesn't seem to matter what alteration you're in. And in fact, zinc and lead show up more in the propylitic than anything else. So this is a geological blender. This isn't like a standard porphyry deposit where you look at the potassic zone, you go to the phyllic, and this thing's been just mixed up. And it's a function of how it formed, how the epithermal deposit superimposed on the tin, and how the Andean deformation continued to mix it up after that, which makes sort of seeing through all this one of the challenge. But it's also an opportunity, because if you drill in a propylitic zone, which if you were doing a porphyry deposit, you say, oh, darn, I'm out of my system. Hey, in this place, you're still in the system, and it can be, you can get just as good grades here as here, or here, or here. You can see tourmaline is a relatively small component. That's because the tin isn't with the tourmaline, it comes after the tourmaline, but it's an indicator that the tin is not far away. So looking at metal zonation here, just very quickly, on the left here, red is tin, purple is copper. Think of Cornwall. They started out with copper, went down into tin. Same thing happens in Bolivia. So it looks like there's potential for a copper zone on the side. The red is here. Now, if you look at the zinc, you can see how, well, zinc's here, copper's here, never the twain shall meet. If we look at silver, its distribution is basically all over the place. Lead is reasonably distributed over, but a little more restricted and overlaps on the tin. Now, looking at core scanning, this is the Geologic AI scanner here. Zahira, one of our geologists, we use this throughout the logging process. We scan the core unsplit, unsawn, and then after it's sawn, the geologist, well, they log the core unsawn and then look at it sawn. And so these are, you know, it has gives you beautiful images, wet or dry, hyperspectral, infrared, near visible and near infrared. XRF does 2 profiles, and LiDAR to give you the configuration of the core. And we've worked with them to add magnetic susceptibility, which is quite useful. And so there's a typical screen here, the core here on the right. And you can pick to show mineral maps or whatever, lithology. We have this all in the system. And this is telling you your different metals here. The one thing that's really important is to calibrate this to your assays. This isn't something you take out of the box and plug in. You've got to do your calibration. So we're working with Geologic AI on the auto logger and mineral maps are very advanced, as is the alteration and mineralogy. And we've pretty much done all this. Our big thing right now is figuring out geomet zones for our metallurgists and integrating ore sorting with the scanner data. And of course, we have that study with Western. Geotech data does things like RQD very, very well. And the other thing I like is I can sit at my computer and look at core in my basement, and it sure beats pulling out stacks and stacks of core to have a look at things. So our initial mineral resource here, we put this out recently. Basically, we have the two domains that I talked about, the polymetallic, which is silver, zinc, lead, and tin, which is tin, silver, and lead. So you can see the numbers here, 560 million here, 0.73 zinc, 0.28 lead, and 13.8 silver. And of course, everyone says, well, it's kind of low grade, blah, 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 blah. But I'll show you why we think this will change substantially with further work. The other thing that people haven't paid much attention to, this is a 1-to-1 strip, folks. For a deposit this size, a 1-to-1 strip is wonderful. And look at the size of the pit. This is a 1.4 kilometer pit that goes down 750 meters below the Santa Barbara Hill. And as I mentioned, the mineralization is still open. Lots of metal here, almost 300 million ounces of silver, which by the way makes this, I think, the third largest undeveloped silver deposit. We're about the 10th zinc. And according to the Tin Association, we're actually the 10th undeveloped tin deposit in the world. So it's a big, big resource. You also notice that we did this, Micron did this with an NSR cutoff. So the NSR cutoff, this takes into account your operating costs, your mining, your milling, your G&A. It takes into account metallurgical recovery and also smelter recovery. So it's a pretty solid number. The reason why the NSR cutoff is a little higher in the polymetallic than the tin is because of the ore sorting results, which I'll show you shortly. And this just gives you a cross section here. You can see there's a higher grade area here in the red, which is greater than 25 NSR cutoff. And that has 132 million at 1.1 zinc, 0.5 lead, 24.3 grams silver. So that's, and we've started a PEA, and that's what it's focused on. And we're doing a definition drilling to expand that. But these numbers are huge. And here's a little more detail on this higher grade zone here. Hangs together very nicely. But the next slide is what is really interesting here. This is one Charlie put together. This is zinc. Well, if you look at it, guess what? This is where we have the most drilling. That happens to be the highest grade. But when you look at the geology, there's no geological reason why that is higher grade. It's simply higher grade because you got better sampling. And the blue holes here are in the tin domain. So there's this whole area here which needs more drilling. And by the way, that 1-to-1 strip, we have areas in there we don't even have any drilling. So there's lots and lots of upside, and I'm very confident you'll see the grade go up. I know Quentin Hennig mentioned that in his talk about San Cristobal, because Quentin's one of our advisors. The grade of silver at San Cristobal is around 40, 45. I think that eventually, as we get more drilling, you'll see our grades start to go in that direction. Now, ore sorting. Most people don't know about ore sorting. Fortunately, our chief strategic metallurgist and our PEA manager Mike Hollowell is an expert on this. He's done 5 major projects. He's doing South Crofty now. This is absolutely phenomenal technology, which I don't think people realize how much leverage there is. So Mike put together this flow sheet. So the principle is here, bulk mining is low cost. There's absolutely no way you can selectively mine Iska. So here's what you mine, 100% waste, 100% metal. And then it goes through this neat process, the ore sorter. And this is a little sketch. Basically, you crush the material down, and there's quite a process to optimize crushing size. And it comes along this conveyor belt. You can see here there's an X-ray source, and there's an air compressor that operates a gun. This whole thing happens in milliseconds. So it goes through there, it recognizes, hey, that's ore. So it blows it out into the ore bin. It's not ore, it drops into the waste bin. And by the way, you can actually switch these. So when it comes out there, and this is based on our initial tests in the polymetallic domain, the waste is 43% of the weight, but we've only lost 7% of the metal. And even if you ground all that, you get nothing out of it anyway. And down in the ore, we've got 57. And by the way, I use the ore in a general sense. I'm not implying Iska is ore. And we have 93% metal. So that lowers CapEx here. And obviously, it also increases the grade into your concentrator significantly. So you're automatically getting higher recovery, you have less stuff going to tailings. So huge benefit. And this is what the initial test from Tomra looks like. You basically take a small rock sample, they mount it on a plastic sheet, they put it in their XRT scanner, and they send you this data. So here's high grade, low grade, medium grade. And what it's doing is picking up on the density of the material in the rock. And they've got some very clever algorithms who do all this stuff. So you can see in the high grade, well, all of that's going to go into the ore bin. And you can see in the low grade, well, you're going to lose a little bit of metal here, but most of it's got nothing in it. That's the waste bin. Now, if we look at a medium grain here, you can see this grain, this one, these guys here, this one. That's going to go in the ore bin, but you're going to get rid of this stuff, which doesn't have much. And that's fundamentally how it works. It's amazing how they're expanding the technology. They're speeding the whole process up. They're also building larger machines now. And this is a real game changer, not only for Iska, but for other projects. But make sure your deposit is amenable to it. People have tried it on nuggety gold. It will not work on nuggety gold because it can't pick up gold. It can only pick up. But if you had a sulfidized iron formation, it should work very nicely. So, and I think that's one of the reasons this has got a bit of a bad rap. People don't understand the process. If anyone wants to talk about the process, I will connect them with Mike. He's an expert on it, and it's phenomenal technology. That sample here actually is on its way to Germany very shortly, and we'll be doing our full cascade test next week, which will be very exciting. So let's have a quick look at geophysics here. My time is running out. So this is a huge system. Well, look at the analytical signal here. You can see this area in here. That's where the epithermal is. It's not terribly magnetic, but around it, it's all magnetic. This system is 5 by 3 kilometers. We did some bit of drilling down here, picked up some tin. There's some old artisanal workings there that had some small production in the 60s. That's the Iska system. And as I'll show you here, if we look at the magnetic profile, there's the open pit here, and you can see the strong magnetics as you go down. And also show you, we think the potential tin porphyry is sitting down here. These are a couple of my favorite pictures. This is Porco, massive sulfide vein. We had 117 grams silver, 1.4 gold, 0.5 copper, and 0.66 tin over 103 meters out of this adit. And that's a stock work there. But what blew me away when I walked into this adit is this is in a quartzite. I mean, think about it. Quartzite is usually the worst host. this thing is shattered. So it's telling you what an intense system this whole Iska is. Now looking down the valley here, I'm standing on the Santa Barbara Hill. You can see down in the valley, there's Porco. Domo San Juan is another target. There's the conductivity anomalies. And we were following this. This is why we realized, hey, this thing goes right across the valley. But if you, and this is all from borehole data. This is surface IP, but it's kind of a no-brainer. This comes all the way down here. So what's the significance of that? Well, when we drilled the holes through the polymetallic silver zinc lead zone, we go down here, we get no tin, and then suddenly we hit the bottom of the zone and bingo, we start getting tin near the bottom here. And you can see how this chargeability anomaly is ringing through here. And it's because you've got probably 10, 15% sulfides. They're connected in a mesh-like manner. Obviously, if you're getting conductivity, you've got to have electrical connectivity. And of course, with the pyrrhotite, it's also magnetic. And you can see how this has gone down as if the whole epithermal thing just kind of pushed this down, but it's coming up. It's coming up in this Porco area, and it's also coming up on the west side. So this is an exciting target for us, and you're going to see this project evolve into, hey, we're doing a PEA. This to me is in the bank as an explorationist. It's a no-brainer to do more drilling and drilling off, but it's there. This is the huge upside of Iska. I already got one world-class deposit in the bank. I can improve and expand it. But if I can show that, yes, this is far bigger, and by the way, I'm starting with 110 million tons, which is not bad. So looking at, just to sort of conclude here, here's the geological model of the magnetics, which we think outlines this potential tin porphyry. There's your block model here. Again, look at the scale. You know, this thing is massive. And if we get back to our original map in Bolivia, here's Osvaldo's comment, who knows Bolivian deposits better than anyone. I mean, this is definitely a giant deposit. We're on the scale of Cerro Rico, obviously not as much silver, but certainly, and most people don't think of Cerro Rico as having tin, but there's been estimates that it has 500 million tons of 0.2 tin. And Yagaya, which is the largest tin deposit in Bolivia, is about 80 million tons of 0.3 tin. So we've been joining an exclusive club here. And this is an interesting conceptual model that Osvaldo had in his book. Here's the typical porphyry epithermal, the green being epithermal. Here's the porphyry down. In Iska, we have all these types of deposits. We have Santa Barbara brecciapite, which is at a similar level to Cerro Rico. Wauwacasa is much higher, obviously way smaller than San Cristobal, but at a similar level. And then we get down to Central Porco and those high conductivity targets I showed you. So there's a kilometer right there. That's the distance from the valley floor to the peak. So it's quite extraordinary. And there's a cartoon that Osvaldo put together. So we have our early tin porphyry complex. Then we have our stage 2 with, after the caldera collapse, we have the resurgent phase. We get domes, these brecciapipes, and then we get a substantive structural upgrading. And this whole process is what has kind of blended this into this homogenized complex where it's harder to see the original relationships. But when you stand back and look at the geophysics and the overall geology, you can see these different phases. And then, of course, there's been some uplift. Bolivia is actually glaciated, which most people don't realize. And things like the central breccia have likely come up. There's the Santa Barbara. So just to conclude then, well, I hope, as you can see from what I presented you, we have the potential to host 2 world-class deposits in the same property. In my opinion, the polymetallic silver, zinc, lead to me is in the bank. As an explorationist, I've done my job. It's there. There's no doubt it's there. Yes, it needs more drilling. I think the grade will definitely improve, as Charlie believes as well. But the big upside here right now is, hey, I want to go after that tin. I obviously need some more money. And if we could please get a little better markets, that would be great. It's extraordinary to be on a property to have an opportunity to have two world-class deposits. I love Bolivia. It's a great place to be. Government's been very supportive. The local population we have excellent relationships with, although we never take it for granted. And, you know, we moved this forward in just 3 years with 56 million in equity. And here we are at a giant deposit, a large resource in the polymetallic. The tin is still 110 million tons. It's pretty big, but I think this is going to be another giant. And we built a very, very strong Bolivian operational team. We're certainly employing all the state-of-the-art technology. That's always been my style, with the goal of maximizing exploration success. And the whole thing is still open. So very, very interesting times at Eloro. And I look forward to getting back. We're drilling now in a small definition program, but I'm looking forward to getting back there and really, particularly going after the tin target and obviously moving the PEA forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I'll get you to stay there for a second. I'm
sure.
I have quite a few questions from our audience here and those online. For any of the questions, Bill, if you wouldn't mind just repeating or summarizing them briefly into the mic so that the
Okay, as long as, where do I hear them from?
Oh, well, Volker at the back will read them out to you.
Oh, okay,
But
sure.
before that, is there any questions from our guests here? Yes, Ray.
Oh, well done, Bill.
Thank you.
You quoted metallurgical recoveries of 88% silver, 50% tin, and so on. Were they to a single concentrate or two concentrates or three?
That's actually three.
Question really quick.
Yes, there's a question from the floor about whether or not our metallurgical recoveries were in one concentrate or multiple. The answer to that is the process that Mike envisions is producing a zinc concentrate and a lead concentrate. The silver, there's some silver in the zinc concentrate, but more of it is in the lead. And then the tin basically would be the tailings from those two circuits into a tin concentrate. We have an excellent pyrometallurgist, Ken Robiard, who's from Australia. He's got extensive experience with smelting, so we've been looking into quite a bit into tin fuming. So, but the tin is a longer term project. This present PEA, the way the tin is configured, there isn't really much tin that will come in. So there's really not enough to justify putting in a tin circuit in this study, but we're doing the metallurgy to improve. I certainly think we'll get higher than 50% recovery. The other thing is when we did the ore sorting test, you know, as I showed you on the polymetallic domain, you know, we got rid of 43%, well, in the tin domain, we got rid of 80% of the waste. So the tin is very much in veins and so forth. And it seems to be very amenable to separation. So our metallurgical program that we're doing right now, we drilled 3 met holes, about 900 odd meters of core, and we shipped about 650 of that over to Wardle to crush, and goes over to Germany. And sometimes the things you have to do in exploration, but if we tried to get a permit to send the whole shipment out, it would have taken 3-4 months. But AHK, who's one of our labs, has a permit to ship samples worldwide as long as they don't exceed 30 kg. So anyway, so 330 core boxes with about 10 tons of core went by a DHL to Wardle in Cornwall. So we're not forgetting about the tin. And remember too, those recoveries are really preliminary. The recovery is going to be improved, I'm sure. But if you're looking for tin in the PEA, it's to me, it's a downstream exploration project, but we're going to continue to work and refine the metallurgy. So at the end of the day, ultimately, there'll be three major products out of or concentrates from.
Well, a quick
from Mecca.
follow-up thing, for example, you're saying 87% recovery of zinc. Is that to both the zinc and the lead concentrate, or just to the zinc concentrate?
The question is, with regard to the zinc concentrate, is that recovery just to the zinc, or is it also in the lead? The answer is the zinc concentrate is a zinc concentrate. That's where the zinc goes. There's no zinc in the lead concentrate. It's silver that is in both, but dominantly in the lead concentrate.
So the silver 88%, that would be combined lead and zinc concentrate.
Yes, yeah, definitely. If you read the metallurgy section in the 43101 report that's filed on CDAR Plus, it goes over all that with the test results and so forth.
Any other questions? One at the back?
Yeah, just about the ore sorting. Does that need to be recalibrated based on which part of the deposit you'd be mining? So if you're mining the tin-rich area versus the polymetallic?
Great question.
Yeah, there's a question on the ore sorting. If you're mining the tin versus the polymetallic, do you have to recalibrate it? The answer is in the testing, and the next testing stage we're doing is what's called a cascade test. So they use what they call a series of gates that look at different particle sizes. And what they normally do is they'll set a very tight gate, so they'll see how much high-grade stuff comes off. So maybe they get 5%, and then they'll make it a little broader, and maybe they'll get 15%. So they get an overall feeling for how that the samples react. And they'll do that both for the polymetallic and the tin. But definitely, and that's one of the reasons why we're so focused on figuring out these geomet zones, because I want to bring this information into the mine planning so that in our model, we can give an idea of, okay, will this sort really well, or will this be less good, or do we have to use a different setting? Because this process is very fluid and flexible. It's not like you set it at one setting and then you let it run. But yeah, it's a very good question. And the technology behind this is really phenomenal. It's really, if you go to their website, it's very general, but having talked to them and listened to the details, there's some pretty sophisticated algorithms that go through all this. So it's flexible, but you absolutely have to understand your ore and to optimize how it recovers. But once you get it set up, it works like a charm.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ron.
one question from.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Walter.
One question from the online audience is, thank you for the talk. And what are the prospects for developing a major project in Bolivia in view of historic tendency to nationalize mining assets?
The question is, what are the prospects of developing a large project in Bolivia with the tendency to nationalize project? Personally, I think those days are over. If you look at where the country is now, and President Arce has been quite open to foreign investment, but with full involvement, obviously, of Bolivians. So if you come down to our site, we have a Bolivian partner, we have a Bolivian team. We use mainly Bolivian contractors. You know, Bolivia right now, economically, they need mining. Their gas production is slowing down, which is causing them issues. They also they heavily subsidize fuel. So of course that's got to be purchased with US dollars or foreign currency in general. So they need foreign investment. There's a $3 billion investment coming in from the Chinese to develop the Uyuni Salar, which is the largest salar in the world. I visited it in September. It's an incredible thing. It's 100 kilometers in diameter. It's just salt. It's quite remarkable. So, you know, this is one of the problems with Bolivia. People are stuck in their thinking 10 or 15 years ago. Things change a lot in Latin America, and Bolivia has really changed. Their regulations are quite reasonable. We've had nothing but strong support from the community, and I'm very confident going forward. Yes, you will be able to build a major project in Bolivia. Don't think Bolivia is what it's 10 or 15 years ago. It's much, much different country, but you have to be a responsible operator. You have to absolutely employ and use Bolivian people and contractors. Our drill contractor, for example, the Duke, is Bolivian, and they're excellent. So I'm very positive on potential in Bolivia. And we have people like Osvaldo who knows the local politics very well. So I'm very positive on Bolivia. I think it's a good place to be.
Yes. Bill, what's your, I guess, your plan or timing for testing of your tin porphyry target?
The question is, what is the timing and testing of the tin porphyry target? Well, we've done a little bit of preparatory work. We've extended our IP coverage over to the west to get a better feeling for there. We just need to get into better markets so we can get ourselves refinanced. We did Tom Larson, our CEO, has a good nose for the market, and we did a small financing in June, which was a good move. So we've got sufficient funds to pay for our current program through to the PEA, but clearly we would like to refinance sometime in hopefully the first quarter or half of the new year and really go after that tin. So it's going to be money driven. The target is there. And of course, we're spending time now. I like to call it the brain work. You know, it's very hard to think about anything when you got 5 drills running and core coming at you left, right, and center. So we've got a little bit of respite here. So I'm pushing hard on the interpretation. I mean, just the whole exercise of putting this talk together, I haven't been able to do that before. I've been so busy. So this has been a wonderful exercise, putting this together and, you know, having the privilege of telling our story to everyone. So that's what we'll be doing the next few months. But I look forward to getting back to 3 or 4 drills and really going. And it's going to be driven by availability of capital.
I have a question, Bill. You know, I've always, for as long as I've known you, you've always been, you haven't been shy to adapt new technologies when it comes to exploration, whether it's core scanning or ore sorting. And I noticed that one of the first slides you show, you talked about AI being implemented. Can you talk a bit about what you're doing there on that side?
Yeah, sure. The question is, what are we doing using AI? How are we implementing it? Kurt noted that, well, all through my career, I've used technology and I've never been shy to, as he said, take on something new. Absolutely. What we're doing with the AI is putting those computers to work. I mean, for so many years, computers have done nothing but create work for us and haven't given us a hell of a lot back. So it's been fascinating working with the group in Geological AI group in Calgary. They have some really sharp folks on this. So what we're doing is using the AI to define the stuff that is much more difficult to do for the individual geologist. Like, for example, if I have I'm looking at all these different breccia types. If I had my geologist going through 80,000 meters of core to try and figure these things out, it would be a mammoth task. Well, we're taking the opposite approach. We have Camila, who's doing her master's thesis, figuring out the main criteria, and we're feeding that main criteria into the AI. And we've done some initial runs, and it looks quite promising. The other thing that Mike wants to know is for instance, he wants to know zinc lead ratios. How is that distributed? So ultimately, this ties into geomet modeling. So I want to come up with a model so that when I have a mine plan, I can integrate the core scanning, I can integrate the geomet, and I can also use it to give me better criteria to improve my exploration success. One of the big ones is figuring out which structures are controlling silver. It's not clear right at the moment. I want to make sure that my next drill program is optimized to provide a statistically reasonable sampling of those high-grade silver, because as you can imagine, you hit some 1,000-gram stuff, boy, it does wonders for your overall grade. So that's really kind of in a nutshell. And what happens is, as we get into it more and more, we keep thinking of more applications. And the geologic AI folks have a better understanding of what we're after. I think in fact, we just had a call this morning with Tomra talking about how do we integrate the ore sorting with the geologic AI. And this isn't going to be like we're going to duplicate exactly what the ore sorting is doing. What we want to do is figure out, can we model areas that are really good, fair, poor? That's the kind of aim here. And essentially take the project to another level, because if you put yourself in the shoes of the chief metallurgist and the mine manager, you're trying to deliver a consistent feed to that mill. Well, how do you do it? So what I'm trying to do is set this up in advance so it's all there. And that's where the AI comes in. So it's been a real education for me. I've learned a lot, and I keep learning. So, and in our field, I think you never stop learning.
Well, thanks, Bill. Well, I think we'll cap it there. If anyone has any other questions for Bill, which I'm sure you do, they'll stick around for a beer, drinks. So thanks very much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do your last.
Yeah. Perfect. Just before you all head to the bar, just very quickly, we're making up for the pandemic. We've got a couple of presentations coming up over the next few weeks. Next week, we're happy to welcome Linda Bloom, our former TGDG exec member. She'll give a presentation on assay quality control. And then the following week after that, we're welcoming Justin Daly from VR Resources. Mark your calendars, please. Tuesday, December 5th, we will be hosting our annual holiday mixer at Say What Pub. Have a look on our website. I don't believe registration's open just yet, but that will be momentarily. So in the meantime, please, like I say, mark your calendars, and we're happy to welcome back the ROM again, who have graciously offered to bring some of their special rock samples, mineral samples for a quiz by the looks of it. So bring your thinking hat. Thanks again to Bill for your time today, and to Eloro Resources for sponsoring the networking reception before and after our talk. Thanks everyone for showing up, and see you all soon. Cheers.